All right, our next guest here on the morning show, as I've mentioned throughout the week, I've been very lucky with my job. I've been able to talk to a lot of celebrities and fun people, and I'm very excited about that. But I've never talked to a president, somebody who sat in power in the White House, and I'm very excited to have President Jimmy Carter on the show with us. Thank you, sir. It's such an honor to have you on the show.
Well, it's good to be with you. Thank you very much for letting me be on your program.
I know we don't have a whole lot of time, so I want to spend some time about the new book. You're the first former president to publish a White House diary, but you say that President Nixon played a part in your decision to keep a diary in the first place. That would be the last person I would expect to tell you to keep a diary. How did this come about?
Well, yes, when we first met him, I was governor of Georgia. He shook hands with my wife, and he said, "Young lady, do you keep a diary?" And she said, "No, sir." He said, "Well, you really ought to." And so that's one reason that I began to keep a diary when I was in the White House. But I didn't ever tape anybody as he did, and I didn't get in trouble with mine as he did.
It's like you can always edit a diary, you know what I
mean? Well, I haven't edited mine. My diary that I publish is excerpts from the original text, and I haven't changed any meaning at all. And then after about a year, I'm going to make the entire thing with all of its typographical errors and everything else available to scholars and news reporters and people like that.
So what are we going to find if we open the pages of your book? What are we going to find to be the most surprising thing in the book?
Well, I think the intimate, personal things that happened to me, the people that came in and out of my office, what I thought of them, expressed in very blunt terms. But one of the things that surprised me most is how many of the issues that I had to face that were very difficult for me are still on the Oval Office desk for President Obama. There are about 40 of those issues. Some of them are highly known, like the Middle East peace process and dealing with China, dealing with North Korea, dealing with energy policy and things of that kind, dealing with health care. But there are a lot of other things that still don't seem to go away. I had a problem with Iran, as you know, when they took my hostages, but now Iran is still in the news. It's still a problem for President Obama, but in a different way altogether.
In the time of your administration, it seems like people get along more. Like there's a lot more bipartisanship with and in Congress, and people didn't fight as much. And things like they kind of, it's almost like we all get along better. Why have things really gone downhill? Especially with Tuesday being the past election here, things get pretty nasty. Why do you suppose things are going so far downhill?
Well, I had great relationships with the Congress, both houses, Democrats and Republicans, and had a remarkable batting average with success. But I think the main thing that's happened since then is a massive infusion of enormous amounts of money into the political campaign process. As a matter of fact, when I ran against President Ford first and then later against Governor Reagan, we just used the $2 per person checkoff funds and didn't have any outside funding. Now hundreds of millions of dollars are poured in, and a lot of that money is used for negative advertising to try to destroy the reputation and character of your opponent. And that animosity builds up inside states and makes it blue and red states. It also carries over into Washington when the Congress members and senators get to the national capital. So there's a lot of animosity and even sometimes hatred between Republicans and Democrats, and an inability of the president to get Republicans even to give him 2 or 3 votes. I had a lot of Republican votes, particularly after the second year when then Senator Ted Kennedy began to run against me, and he took away a lot of the liberal Democrats. So I turned more and more toward conservative and moderate Democrats and Republicans.
It's funny because you mentioned Iran earlier and the troubles that followed the revolution. And how would you, if you were President Obama right now, how would you handle what he's facing with your old, for lack of a better term, your old nemesis, Iran?
Well, the fact is that after the Shah fell and we tried to keep the Shah in office, I immediately established diplomatic relations with the new revolutionary government and began to deal with them and talk to them and try to work out things harmoniously. But when the student militants took some of our ambassadors who were over in ambassadorial personnel in Tehran, that's when the problem started. Now, I think that we still ought to have direct communications with Iran. We ought to be talking to them both off the record and on the record. We're at a high level, I would say Secretary of State level. and we ought to make sure that they know that we are not going to bomb them with nuclear weapons, because that's one of the things that would induce them to develop nuclear weapons of their own. So I would say communications is probably the best avenue to prevent another outbreak of war that might generate around Iran.
Now, obviously, history shows that you didn't get the second term, and the Iran hostage crisis probably had a lot to do with that, wouldn't you think? I mean, some of it, if you had gotten that second term, what would you have focused on within your second term?
Well, I think that was the key element that cost me a second term. President Reagan didn't even get 51%. And so I think the hostage crisis, which, by the way, occurred on Election Day a year earlier, that was the main factor. But I would say that if I had been given another term, we would have had peace in the Middle East, because I had already made great strides in dealing with the problem of the Palestinians, and also had worked out a complete treaty between Israel and Egypt, not a word of which, by the way, has ever been violated. But after President Reagan went into office, he didn't have much interest in the Middle East, and over a period of time, Israel began to build settlements in the West Bank and to take over West Bank land. And so that's been the main cause of the outbreak, again, of animosity and a lack of peace in the Middle East.
I know we don't have a whole lot more time, so I've got to let you go. And I really have. There's so many things to talk to you about, sir. But this fascinating new book has a lot of stuff in it. It's called White House Diary, President Jimmy Carter. So glad that you were with us today. Thank you, sir.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.